He was already about to leave when he heard a cloth being scrubbed, too late for it to be normal. In the bathroom, a little girl was cleaning the floor as if she had been doing it all her life. The businessman discovered that the shiny floor hid more than just dirt. If this beautiful story of overcoming and love interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. Richard Miller adjusted the knot of his Hermes tie as he gazed out at the illuminated New York City skyline through the panoramic windows of the 35th floor. At 42, he had built an empire that started with a small consulting firm and now spanned 3 countries. Miller and Associates occupied 2 full floors of one of the most expensive buildings on Park Avenue. Yet Richard rarely felt satisfied with his achievements. The existential void that accompanied him every day seemed to intensify in those moments of silence, when the numbers stopped dancing in his head and he was left alone with his thoughts. 42 years old, single, no children, no one waiting for him at home. Just spreadsheets, contracts, and a bank account that grew exponentially but couldn't fill the hole he felt in his chest. It was almost 10 o'clock on a Thursday night when he finally decided to leave. The office had been empty for hours, except for the security guards and the overnight cleaning crew. Richard had an obsessive habit of walking the halls before he left, checking that everything was in order. It was a compulsion he'd developed in the early years of the company when he couldn't trust anyone but himself. That Thursday had been particularly exhausting. The board meeting had dragged on for 4 hours, filled with heated discussions about expanding into the European market. Richard knew he was right about the risks he'd pointed out, but his sister Beatrice, who held the position of Chief Operating Officer, had countered every one of his arguments with a coldness that disturbed him. Beatrice had always been ambitious, but lately Richard had noticed something different about her. A hardness in her eyes, an indifference to matters that used to bother her. During the meeting, when one of the directors mentioned the layoffs needed to cut costs, she simply nodded, as if they were talking about switching paper suppliers. The silence of the 35th floor was broken only by the low hum of the air conditioning and his footsteps echoing on the imported Italian marble. Richard paused in front of his private office, looking through the bulletproof glass at the desk still covered in contracts he needed to review the next day. His schedule was packed: a meeting with Japanese investors in the morning, lunch with the mayor to discuss the new real estate project in the South Bronx, and in the afternoon, a video conference with the Miami branch about accounting irregularities they had discovered. He was about to call the elevator when he heard a strange noise coming from the end of the hallway. It was a repetitive, rhythmic sound, like a wet cloth being scrubbed against a hard surface, accompanied by restrained, careful breathing. Richard frowned. The cleaning crew should have finished at least an hour ago, according to the schedule he himself had approved. Walking toward the sound, Richard noticed a dim light seeping from under the door of the executive men's room, the one reserved only for directors and VIP visitors. The noise grew clearer as he approached, water dripping at regular intervals, precise and deliberate movements, and something that made him stop completely, the sound of someone trying to breathe without making a sound, as if they were afraid of being discovered. Richard hesitated for a moment. A part of him wanted to just leave and drop a note for Mark, the facilities manager, to deal with it the next day. But there was something about the rhythm of those movements, about the exaggerated caution of that person, that piqued his curiosity. He prided himself on knowing every detail of his company, every process, every employee. This was out of the ordinary. He pushed the door open slowly, prepared to find maybe a new employee working overtime, or a security guard who had forgotten something. What he saw left him frozen. A small girl who couldn't have been more than 4 years old was kneeling on the cold marble floor of the bathroom, wearing a blue cleaning uniform that was clearly too big for her. The sleeves were rolled up several times and the pants dragged on the wet floor. Her thin arms, with a paleness that suggested a lack of sun, held a soaked rag as she meticulously scrubbed the toilet bowl, with movements too precise, too practiced for a child her age. Her brown hair was pulled back into a ponytail, so tight it stretched the corners of her eyes, and she was biting her lower lip in absolute concentration, as if her life depended on leaving everything perfectly clean. Her small hands were red and raw from contact with the chemicals, and Richard could see small cuts on her fingers. The girl didn't see him at first. She was too busy pouring more disinfectant into the toilet and scrubbing every inch with a dedication that bordered on desperation. She was muttering something quietly to herself, like a prayer or a list of instructions she had memorized. When she finally noticed Richard's presence reflected in the polished mirror in front of her, she went completely still, the rag falling from her trembling hands. The eyes that turned to him were a child's, but they carried a weight that shouldn't exist. They were eyes that had seen fear, that knew punishment, that understood every move could have dire consequences. "Please, don't get me fired," she whispered, her voice so low Richard had to lean in to hear. "I'm almost done. I swear I'm almost done. I just need 5 more minutes. Please." Richard felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. The way she flinched, automatically protecting her head with her thin arms like a wounded animal expecting another blow, made something inside him break. It wasn't just that a child was working at this hour. It was the way she begged not to be fired, as if that were the worst possible fate. "What's your name?" Richard asked, forcing his voice to sound calm as he slowly knelt to be at her level, careful not to make any sudden movements. "Marina," she answered, still trembling like a leaf in the wind. "Marina Garcia. I'm 4.5. I know how to work. I clean real good. Aunt Agnes taught me everything. I can clean bathrooms, sweep, mop, organize papers." The words came out in a desperate torrent, as if she were trying to prove her worth. "Where is Aunt Agnes now?" "She went to clean the 36th floor. She said I could finish up here by myself, if I was fast and didn't make any noise." Marina wiped her nose with the back of her hand, leaving a smear of cleaning product on her flushed cheek. "I always finish on time. I never leave anything dirty. I check 3 times before I leave." Richard looked around the bathroom. It was immaculate, cleaner than he had ever seen it. Every tile shone as if it were new. There wasn't a single smudge on the mirror. The metal of the faucets gleamed, and the smell of disinfectant was so strong it stung his eyes. A 4-year-old girl had done this alone with a perfection many adults couldn't achieve. "Marina, do you live with Aunt Agnes?" The girl nodded quickly, her eyes never leaving Richard's face as if trying to decipher his intentions. "She said if I work hard and I'm obedient, I can stay. But if I'm lazy or make noise or if I bother the important people, she's going to send me back." Her eyes filled with tears that she tried to hold back by blinking rapidly. "I don't want to be sent back. I promise I'm a good girl. I work really hard." The words, "send me back," echoed in Richard's mind like a deafening alarm. Send her back where? To whom? And why was a child so young talking about work as if it were a matter of life and death? Why did she have such a clear notion that she could be discarded? "Marina, do you go to school?" She shook her head vigorously as if the question were absurd. "School is for kids who have a mommy and daddy to pay for it. Aunt Agnes says I need to work to pay for my food and my place to sleep, because nothing in life is free." She lowered her voice even more. "She said if I'm too little to work, then I'm too little to eat, and that there are other places where useless kids end up." Richard felt sick to his stomach. This child was being systematically and cruelly exploited, and the worst part was that she had internalized this situation as the natural order of things. She truly believed she needed to work to deserve the right to exist. "Marina, listen to me very carefully," Richard said, his voice trembling with a rage he struggled to control. "You don't need to work to deserve food or a place to sleep. Kids don't work. Kids play, they go to school, they watch cartoons, they sleep when they want to sleep." "But Aunt Agnes said that's a lie. That's just on TV," Marina replied, confused. "She said kids like me can't have those things because there's no one to pay for them. Aunt Agnes is wrong." The words came out harsher than Richard intended, and he saw Marina shrink back again, her shoulders hunching defensively. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to speak more softly. "You didn't do anything wrong, Marina. None of this is your fault. Do you understand that?" Just then the sound of heavy, hurried footsteps echoed down the hall, approaching quickly. Marina turned pale as a sheet and began scrubbing the floor with even more urgency, her movements becoming frantic. "She's coming," Marina whispered, pure panic etched on her small voice. "Please, Don't tell her I talked to you. Please, don't tell her I stopped working. Please." The door flew open, slamming against the wall with a bang that made Marina cringe even more. A stout woman entered the bathroom like a hurricane. Agnes was in her 50s, her greying hair pulled back with an almost military severity, and her small dark eyes narrowed dangerously when she saw Richard kneeling there near Marina. "Mr. Miller," she exclaimed, trying to force an obsequious smile, but unable to completely hide the tension and desperation in her voice. "What a surprise to see you here so late. Was this little brat bothering you? Marina, get over here right now." Marina immediately dropped everything and scurried behind Agnes like a trained animal. Agnes grabbed her by the arm with a force that left white marks on the girl's thin skin. Richard rose slowly, every muscle in his body tense in a way he hadn't felt in years. His eyes never left the grip Agnes had on Marina's arm. "Marina is my niece," Agnes said quickly, adjusting her grip on the girl's arm. "Her mother died in an accident, and I'm taking care of her. She likes to help me while I work. Right, Marina?" Marina nodded mechanically, but Richard noticed how she avoided Agnes's gaze and how her shoulders hunched even more, as if trying to disappear. "Niece," Richard repeated, crossing his arms. "And where are the custody papers? Is Marina enrolled in any school? Does she have a birth certificate?" Agnes's face turned red. "Mr. Miller, with all due respect, that's none of your business. I'm raising the girl as best I can. If she helps me a little, what's the problem?" "The problem," Richard said, his voice low but filled with authority, "is that a 4-year-old girl shouldn't be working at 10 o'clock at night in an office building. The problem is that she has marks on her arms and talks as if she needs to work to deserve food." Agnes pulled Marina closer to her, trying to hide the marks Richard had noticed. "She's very clumsy, always hurting herself. Kids are like that." "Marina," Richard addressed the girl directly, ignoring Agnes's murderous glare, "can you tell me how long you've been living with Aunt Agnes?" The girl looked at Agnes, who shook her head almost imperceptibly. Marina looked down. "A long time," she mumbled. "Since you were a baby." I don't remember." Richard knelt in front of Marina, maintaining a respectful distance. "Marina, do you remember your mum?" The girl's eyes instantly filled with tears. She nodded quickly, then shook her head, confused. "Mummy got sick. Mummy cried a lot. Mommy couldn't get out of bed." Agnes intervened sharply. "That's enough questions. Marina, pick up the cleaning supplies. We have to go." "You're not going anywhere," Richard said, blocking the exit. He pulled out his cell phone and started dialing. "I'm calling CPS." "Wait!" Agnes shouted, her mask of normalcy finally crumbling. "That's not necessary. I can explain everything." "Then explain." Agnes looked around nervously, as if searching for an escape. Marina had started to tremble, clinging to Agnes's skirt despite everything. "Her mother really did get sick. Depression, you know. Drank a lot, couldn't take good care of the girl. One day she just disappeared, left Marina with me. I had no choice." "And why didn't you go to the authorities? Why didn't you register the situation legally?" "Because," Agnes hesitated, biting her lip, "because I knew they'd put her in a foster home. At least with me, she has a family." "Family?" Richard couldn't hide the rage in his voice. What kind of family puts a 4-year-old girl to work cleaning toilets until 10 at night? "I'm teaching her to be responsible. In the real world, people work for things. She needs to learn that young." Richard looked at Marina, who had huddled against the wall, her eyes too big in her thin face. There was something else here, something Agnes wasn't saying. "Marina," he said kindly, "when was the last time you ate?" "I ate," she said quickly, glancing at Agnes. "When?" "This morning. Bread and margarine." Richard felt his stomach churn. It was almost 11 at night. "And before that?" Marina fell silent, counting on her little fingers. "Yesterday, there was rice." "She eats every day," Agnes said defensively. "She just can't eat whenever she wants. Food costs money. And she earns money by cleaning bathrooms. She earns the right to stay in my house and eat my food." Richard closed his eyes for a moment, trying to control the anger building inside him. When he opened them again, His decision was made. "Agnes, you're fired. Effective immediately." "You can't fire me. I work for the external cleaning company. I can and I will cancel the company's contract if necessary. You will not set foot in here again." Agnes paled. "And Marina? What's going to happen to her?" "Marina will remain under my care until the proper authorities determine what's best for her." "No!" Marina cried, running to Agnes and clinging to her leg. "I'll be good, I promise. Don't leave me." Richard's heart broke seeing the child beg to stay with her abuser, but he knew it was a form of childhood Stockholm syndrome. Marina knew nothing different. "You're going to be okay, Marina," he said softly. "No one is going to hurt you." "But I don't know how to live without working," she sobbed. "If I don't work, how will I eat? How will I have a place to sleep?" Richard approached carefully and held out his hand. "You're going to learn that you can eat and sleep without working, that you can just be a little girl." Marina looked at the outstretched hand as if it were a trap. "What if I'm bad? What if I don't know how to be just a little girl? Then I'll teach you." Agnes pushed Marina away from Richard. "You have no right. She's my responsibility." "Your responsibility?" Richard laughed humorlessly. "You turned a child into a slave. Where does she sleep, Agnes?" Agnes didn't answer, but Richard saw the guilt in her eyes. "On the floor in the laundry room," Marina whispered, "on top of some old blankets. But it's warm," she added quickly, as if not wanting to cause trouble. Richard felt like he'd been punched again. A 4-year-old girl sleeping on a laundry room floor, working like an adult, believing she needed to earn every sip of water. "Marina," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "have you ever seen a little girl's room, with a bed, toys, books?" She slowly shook her head. "Would you like to see one?" Marina's eyes lit up for a second, but then she glanced at Agnes. "Can I?" Before Agnes could answer, Richard had already taken out his phone and called his driver. "Charles, I need you to come pick me up and call Mr. Davis, my lawyer. It's an emergency." "You can't take her," Agnes yelled. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," Richard said calmly. "I'll explain to them exactly what I found here. A 4-year-old girl working as a janitor, sleeping on the floor, being deprived of food and school. Let's see who they investigate." Agnes turned livid. She knew she was beaten. "Marina," Richard knelt again, "do you want to come with me? To a place where you can eat when you're hungry. Sleep so. In a real bed and you don't have to work." Marina looked at him with a mixture of fear and hope that broke Richard's heart. "What if I don't know how to do that? Then we'll learn together." She extended her small, trembling hand toward Richard's. When their fingers touched, he felt the weight of a responsibility that would change his life forever. But as they left the bathroom, Richard couldn't imagine that this decision would set in motion a series of discoveries that would reveal dark secrets about his own company, secrets that were directly linked to the reason Marina had ended up in Agnes's hands in the first place. Richard's black Mercedes was parked at the building's entrance when they came down. Charles, his driver for over 10 years, opened the back door without asking any questions, though his eyes widened slightly at the sight of the small, dirty girl beside his boss. Marina stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, staring at the car as if it were a spaceship. "It's so big," she whispered, clutching Richard's hand tightly. "Have you never been in a car before?" She shook her head. "Aunt Agnes says cars are for rich people. People like me take the bus or walk." Richard felt another stab in his chest. He helped Marina into the car, noticing how she shrank into the leather seat, trying to take up as little space as possible. "Where to, Mr. Miller?" Charles asked through the rearview mirror. "Home and call Mr. Davis. Tell him I need him there in an hour." During the ride, Richard watched Marina timidly explore the car's interior. She touched the leather seats with reverence, as if they were sacred. And when she discovered that the windows went up and down with a button, her eyes lit up for the first time since he'd found her. "Mister," she said quietly, "can I press it again?" "You can press it as many times as you want, Marina." She spent the next 10 minutes playing with the windows, a small but genuine smile appearing on her face. Richard felt something warm spread through his chest. When was the last time he'd seen a child have fun with something so simple? Richard's apartment was in the Upper East Side, a triplex on the top floor of an exclusive building. When the elevator doors opened directly into his living room, Marina froze. "Is all of this your house?" she asked, her voice echoing in the vast, silent space. "Yes, it is." Marina took a few cautious steps on the marble floor, her dirty sneakers leaving small marks. She stopped immediately upon noticing, turning to Richard with her eyes wide with panic. "I'm sorry, I made a mess. I'll clean it. Where's a rag?" "Marina, you don't need to clean anything. A house is for living in, not for being a museum." But she had already knelt and started rubbing the marks with her shirt sleeve. "Aunt Agnes says if I get something dirty in someone else's house, they'll hate me and kick me out." Richard knelt beside her and gently took her small hands. "No one is going to kick you out for some dirty shoes, Marina. In fact, no one is going to kick you out, ever." "You promise?" "I promise." Richard led her through the apartment, watching her reactions. Marina looked at everything with a mix of fascination and fear, as if she didn't have permission to truly see. When they reached the kitchen, her stomach growled loud enough for both of them to hear. "Excuse me," she mumbled, placing her hands on her belly. "You're hungry, that's normal." Richard opened the refrigerator, which was nearly empty. He rarely cooked. "What do you like to eat?" Marina fell silent, staring at the refrigerator as if it were a movie screen. "Marina?" "I eat whatever there is," she said quietly. "I don't get to choose." "Now you do. What would you like to eat if you could choose anything?" She thought for a long time, frowning as if it were the hardest question in the world. "Mac and cheese," she whispered finally. "I saw it on the TV in the bakery once." Richard smiled. "Mac and cheese, I can do that." While he prepared dinner, something he hadn't done in years, Marina sat on one of the bar stools, swinging her short legs that didn't reach the floor. She watched his every move with rapt attention, as if memorizing important instructions. "Mister," she said as the water began to boil, "can I ask something?" "Of course, and you can call me Richard." "Why did you bring me here?" Richard stopped stirring the pasta and turned to her. It was a fair question, but one he didn't know how to answer for a 4-year-old. "Because all kids deserve to have a real home, food when they're hungry, and grown-ups to take care of them. But I'm not your daughter. You don't have to be my daughter for me to want you to be happy." Marina tilted her head, processing this information. "Aunt Agnes says only blood family takes care of each other, that strangers always want something in return." "And what do you think?" "I think you don't seem to want anything from me. You haven't even told me to clean anything yet." The intercom buzzed, interrupting the conversation. It was Maurice Davis, Richard's lawyer since the early days of the company, a man in his 60s, with grey hair and an impeccable reputation in family law. "Richard, where's the emergency?" he asked as he entered, stopping abruptly when he saw Marina. "Oh, Mr. Davis, this is Marina. Marina, this is Mr. Davis. He's a lawyer." Marina hid behind Richard. "Are lawyers for people who did something bad?" "Sometimes," Mr. Davis said softly, crouching down to her level. "But we also help people who need to be protected, like you." Richard quickly explained the situation to the lawyer, who took careful notes while watching Marina eat her first full meal in days. She ate slowly, savoring every bite as if it were her last. "The situation is complicated," Mr. Davis said after they finished dinner, and Marina was distracted watching cartoons on TV, another novelty for her. Without legal documentation of custody, Agnes technically has no rights over the child, but neither do you. What do I need to do? First, we'll file a report with the police for child endangerment and exploitation. Then we'll petition for temporary emergency custody. There will be an investigation, home visits, psychological evaluations. How long does that take? Months, maybe longer. Richard looked at Marina, who had fallen asleep on the couch during the cartoon, finally relaxed after probably years of not feeling safe. And what if the biological mother shows up? Mr. Davis hesitated. That's the tricky part. If she's alive and able to care for the child... Do you think she's alive? I don't know. But Richard, You need to prepare for the possibility that Marina has a real family looking for her. That night, Richard improvised a room for Marina in the study, using sheets from the guest closet and some couch cushions. She woke up 3 times crying, calling for Mommy between heart-wrenching sobs. "Everything's okay," Richard would say, sitting on the edge of the makeshift bed. "You're safe." "Where's my Mommy?" she asked the 3rd time she woke up. "I don't know, Marina, but we're going to find out. Did she leave me because I was bad?" "No, you're not bad. You've never been bad." "Then why did she go away?" Richard had no answer for that. All he could do was stay there until she fell asleep again, silently promising that he would do everything in his power to protect her. The next morning, while Marina was eating breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast and orange juice, things she ate with the same reverence as the day before, Mr. Davis called. "Richard, I need to tell you something. I did some digging last night on Marina's mother. And I found a record. Carla Garcia, 28 years old, worked for Miller & Associates until 3 years ago." Richard felt the world spin. "What do you mean she worked for my company?" "Finance department. She was fired for cause, and Richard, there's more." "What else?" "She filed a formal sexual harassment complaint against one of the senior executives. The complaint was dismissed for lack of evidence, but she was fired 2 weeks later." Richard looked at Marina, who was carefully cutting her toast into perfect little squares, and felt as if the floor had disappeared from under his feet. Marina's mother had worked for him. She had been destroyed by his own company, and he was now discovering that the tragedy that led a 4-year-old girl to work as a slave had begun inside the empire he himself had built. Richard cancelled all his morning meetings. For the first time in 15 years, his corporate agenda took a back seat. Sitting in his office with Carla Garcia's files spread across his desk, he felt as if he were looking at the wreckage of something he thought he knew. "Mr. Davis, I need all the details," he said over the phone while watching Marina on the office camera. She was in the living room sitting on the floor, playing with some toys he had sent Charles to buy in an emergency run. "Who was the executive?" "Edward Vance, vice president of the sales department at the time. He still works at the company." Richard closed his eyes. Edward was more than an employee. He was one of the company's co-founders, his partner in the difficult early years, almost a brother. They had built everything together. "Go on." Carla Garcia filed 3 formal complaints. The first in January 2021, alleging inappropriate comments and persistent invitations. The second in March, after Edward showed up drunk at her apartment. The third in May, accusing him of threatening to fire her if she didn't give in to his advances. And what happened to the complaints? They were all reviewed by the Human Resources Department. Verdict: unfounded. Edward presented counter-evidence. Witnesses who confirmed his version. Carla was deemed a problem employee trying to extort the company. Richard opened Carla's personnel file. An exemplary employee for 2 years, always excellent reviews, no disciplinary complaints, until the allegations against Edward began. Maurice, who was head of HR at that time? Beatrice Miller. Richard's blood ran cold. Beatrice Miller, his younger sister, whom he had put in charge of human resources because he trusted her more than anyone in the world. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. She personally signed off on the dismissal of all 3 complaints." Richard hung up the phone with trembling hands. His sister, the person he considered the most ethical he knew, had participated in the cover-up that destroyed the life of Marina's mother. A noise in the living room made him leave the office. Marina had spilled a glass of water and was desperately trying to clean it up with her hands, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," she sobbed. "I'll clean it. Don't kick me out." Richard knelt beside her, ignoring the water soaking his dress pants. "Marina, look at me." She lifted her face, her eyes red with terror. "You didn't do anything wrong. Accidents happen, and I would never kick you out for something like this. You promise?" "I promise." He helped her clean up the water, but he noticed her little hands were shaking uncontrollably. The trauma was deeper than he had imagined. The intercom buzzed. It was the front desk announcing the arrival of Beatrice Miller. "Send her up," Richard said, feeling his stomach tighten. Beatrice stormed into the apartment, her eyes flashing with indignation. At 38, she still had the same explosive energy of her teenage years. "Richard, what is this I hear about you cancelling? Everything for some kid. And where's Edward? He's been desperately trying to reach you." Then Beatrice saw Marina, who had hidden behind the sofa upon hearing the loud voices. "Who is she?" "Sit down, Beatrice. We need to talk." Richard told her everything, watching his sister's face change from confusion to disbelief, and then to something that looked like panic. "You brought a strange child into your home. Richard, have you lost your mind? What if she's dangerous? What if this is a scam?" "Beatrice, she's 4 years old and she's not a stranger. She's Carla Garcia's daughter." Beatrice's face went pale. "Carla Garcia? You remember her? The employee from finance who filed complaints against Edward?" Of course I remember. Case dismissed for lack of evidence." "Lack of evidence or lack of interest in investigating?" Beatrice stood up abruptly. "I don't like your tone, Richard. That woman was a problem, unstable. Edward is an exemplary professional. A problem enough to have her life destroyed. To disappear and leave her daughter in the hands of an exploiter? That's not our fault." Marina started crying in a corner of the room, frightened by the shouting. Richard went to her, taking her in his arms. "Beatrice, lower your voice. You're scaring her." "Richard, you can't keep this girl. She's going to bring trouble to the company. Can you imagine if the press finds out the CEO of Miller & Associates is involved with the daughter of a disgruntled ex-employee?" "Disgruntled?" Richard felt rage rising in his throat. "A woman who reported sexual harassment and was fired for it is disgruntled. She was fired for lack of productivity and an inappropriate attitude." After 3 complaints were dismissed without a real investigation. Beatrice fell silent, her eyes darting from Richard to Marina and back to Richard. "Do you have the case files?" Richard asked. "Of course I do, but Richard, that was 3 years ago. It's water under the bridge. I want to see all the documents today." "Why?" "Because I need to know the truth, and because I have a feeling this little girl isn't the only victim in this story." Beatrice sighed deeply. "Fine, but Richard, you have to think about what you're doing. Edward has been our partner for 15 years. The company has multi-million-dollar contracts with clients who trust him. So what? So if you start digging into this, you could destroy everything we've built." At that moment, Richard's cell phone rang. It was Mr. Davis. "Richard, I need you to come to my office now. I found something about the Carla Garcia investigation." "What is it?" "She didn't disappear. She's been in a psychiatric clinic in Westchester for the past 2 years. Multiple suicide attempts, severe depression." Richard felt like he'd been punched. "She's alive?" "She is. And there's more. I managed to contact the doctor in charge. Carla talks about her daughter constantly. She never stopped looking for Marina." Richard looked at the little girl in his arms who had stopped crying and was now watching him with those big, trusting eyes. "Mr. Davis, can you arrange a visit?" "I can. But Richard, you need to be prepared. According to the doctor, Carla is very fragile. The trauma of being fired and losing her daughter completely broke her." After hanging up, Richard found Beatrice still standing in the same spot, but now she seemed smaller, as if she had shrunk. "Marina's mother is alive," he said. That's good, isn't it? She's been institutionalized for 2 years for severe depression. Multiple suicide attempts." Beatrice sat down heavily on the sofa. "Oh my God. Beatrice, I need to know exactly what happened 3 years ago. I need every detail, every recording, every email, everything." "Richard, if you get into this..." "What, Beatrice? The company will go bankrupt? Our reputation will be tarnished?" He gestured toward Marina. "Look at her. Look at what our negligence caused." Beatrice looked at Marina, who had snuggled into Richard's chest and started to doze off, finally feeling safe after years of fear. "Okay," Beatrice whispered. "I'll bring you the files, all of them." "And Beatrice?" "Yes?" "If I find out that Edward really did what Carla accused him of, and that you helped cover it up, there will be no family to protect you. Understood?" Beatrice nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. After she left, Richard was alone with Marina, who was sleeping in his arms. Through the window, he could see New York City moving below. Millions of people going about their normal lives, unaware that on the 35th floor of a Park Avenue skyscraper, a man was discovering that his entire life had been built on lies. His phone buzzed with a text from Edward. "Richard, I need to talk to you, urgent. Beatrice told me you're looking into old cases. I can explain everything." Richard looked at the message and then at Marina sleeping in his arms. For the first time, he began to suspect that the story was even bigger and darker than he had imagined. Edward Vance arrived at Richard's apartment 2 hours later, carrying a folder of documents and an expression that mixed desperation with determination. Richard had put Marina to sleep in the improvised room and asked Charles to keep an eye on her. "Richard, my friend," Edward began as soon as he entered, extending his hand with the forced smile he used in difficult meetings. "We need to talk about this misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Richard didn't take the offered hand. "Sit down, Edward, and explain to me what this misunderstanding is." Edward perched on the edge of the sofa, the folder balanced on his knees. At 45, he still had the same superficial charm that had made him an exceptional salesman, but Richard noticed the sweat on his brow, the way his hands trembled slightly. "Carla Garcia was a problem from the start," Edward said, opening the folder. "I brought some documents that prove it. Reports. From colleagues, attendance records, evaluations. Edward, tell me what really happened." "That's what I'm trying to tell you. The woman became obsessed with me. It started with strange looks, then inappropriate comments, attempts to seduce me." "Edward. And when I remained professional, she got angry. She started making up stories, accusing me of absurd things." "Edward!" Richard slammed his hand on the table, making his partner jump. "Stop lying to me." Edward fell silent, his hands now trembling more visibly. "I spoke with Mr. Davis this morning," Richard continued. "He got access to the real files, not the edited. Versions Beatrice kept. I know about the emails you sent Carla after work hours. I know about the times you showed up at her apartment for no reason. I know about the night you went to her place drunk." Edward swallowed hard. "Richard, you don't understand." "Then make me understand." It was complicated. Carla was beautiful, smart. I was going through a rough patch in my marriage. You know how it is. Maybe I was a little too persistent. But I never forced anything." "Too persistent?" Richard stood up, walking toward the window. "Edward, she filed 3 formal complaints. 3. That's not being persistent, that's harassment. They were misunderstandings. I never touched her. I never threatened to fire her." Richard spun around. "And the audio recordings?" Edward's face went white as a sheet. "What audio recordings?" "Mr. Davis got access to the phone Carla turned in as evidence. Apparently Beatrice gave the phone back to her when she dismissed the case, but she forgot to delete the recordings." Edward staggered to his feet. "Richard, I can explain." "Then explain why you told her that ambitious young women who make false accusations can lose a lot more than their jobs. Explain why you threatened to put her on an industry blacklist." "I was on edge. I was being falsely accused." "Falsely?" Richard took out his phone and played an audio file Mr. Davis had sent him earlier. Edward's voice echoed through the apartment. "Carla, you know I have connections in this city. I can make your professional life a living hell, or I can make it all go away. Your choice." Edward sank onto the sofa, covering his face with his hands. "Oh my God. There's more, Edward, a lot more. Recordings of you offering promotions in exchange for special favors. Text messages in the middle of the night, veiled threats when she turned down your invitations. Stop, Richard, please. And you know what the worst part is? Beatrice knew. My own sister heard all of this and still dismissed the case. The two of you consciously destroyed that woman." Edward looked up, tears streaming down his cheeks. "The company was growing so fast, we couldn't afford a scandal. I made mistakes, I admit it, but I didn't think she would, that the consequences would be so severe." "You didn't think?" Richard felt the rage explode inside him. "You fire a single mother. You blacklist her so she can't get a job anywhere. You destroy her professional reputation, and you didn't think it would be severe." We didn't know she had a daughter. Liar, Richard shouted. It's right here in her personnel file. Marina Garcia declared dependent since Carla was hired. You knew exactly what you were doing. A cry came from the bedroom. Richard rushed in to find Marina sitting up in bed, trembling, her eyes wide with fear. The yelling, she whispered, just like when Mommy used to cry. Richard sat on the bed and drew her into his lap. I'm sorry, Marina, no more yelling. Are you going to kick me out? Never. You promise? I promise. He stayed with her until she fell back asleep, quietly singing a song he remembered from his own childhood. When he returned to the living room, Edward was still on the sofa, but now he looked as if he had aged 10 years. That's her, isn't it? Edward asked. Carla's daughter. Yes. How did she end up being exploited by a woman who made her work like a slave to earn her food? Richard sat in the armchair, opposite Edward. Carla tried to kill herself 3 times after she lost her job. The last time she was so bad off she was committed to a psychiatric clinic. Marina was left all alone. My God. Agnes found an abandoned child and saw an opportunity. Marina spent 2 years cleaning toilets, sleeping on the floor, believing she had to work to survive. Edward was now crying openly. Richard, I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know it would go this far. Edward, can I ask you a question? Of course. How many other Carlas are there? Edward looked up, confused. What do you mean, how many? How many other women did you harass? How many other cases did Beatrice dismiss? How many other families were destroyed to protect our precious company? Edward was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was a whisper. 5, maybe 6. Richard felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. 6. Over the years, different situations, but similar. Beatrice always handled it discreetly. How did she handle it? Transfers, layoffs due to restructuring, small out-of-court settlements, nothing that would draw attention. Richard stood up and began pacing the room, trying to process the information. His company, his legacy, had been built on a graveyard of destroyed female careers. Edward, you're going to resign. Richard, you're going to resign, give back all your shares, and you're going to help us find every single one of those women so we can make reparations. That will bankrupt the company. The company deserves to be bankrupted. Edward stood up desperately. Richard, think about what you're saying. This is 15 years of work, hundreds of employees. Are you going to destroy everything over a few mistakes from the past? A few mistakes? Richard pointed toward the room where Marina was sleeping. Look at the result of your few mistakes. A 4-year-old girl who thinks she has to work to deserve love. We can handle this quietly. Pay for the mother's treatment, give a financial settlement, make the girl disappear from the media. Make the girl disappear. Richard stepped toward Edward, his voice dangerously low. Edward, get out of my house now before I do something I'll regret. Richard, please, get out. Edward grabbed his folder and headed for the door, pausing in the doorway. Richard, if you go through with this, you'll lose everything. Beatrice too, the company, the reputation, the contracts. Is it worth destroying everything for a woman you don't even know and a kid who isn't yours? Richard looked at him with a mixture of disgust and pity. Edward, for the first time in my life, I'm going to do something that's actually worth a damn, even if it costs me everything. After Edward left, Richard was alone in the silence of his apartment. In the bedroom, he could hear the soft breathing of Marina sleeping. In his office, he had a stack of documents proving that his company had systematically destroyed women who dared to report abuse. His phone rang. It was Mr. Davis. Richard, I got the visit scheduled for tomorrow morning. Carla's doctor said she's had a good day. Excellent. And Maurice? Yes? I want you to prepare all the necessary paperwork to sue Edward for sexual harassment, and I want a full audit of every case dismissed by Beatrice in the last 10 years. Richard, this is going to be a war. Then let it be a war. It should have started a long time ago. After hanging up, Richard went to check on Marina one more time. She was sleeping, clutching a teddy bear he had bought for her. a small smile on her face. Tomorrow, if all went well, he would take her to see her mother. But first, he would have to find the strength to explain to a 4-year-old girl that her mummy was sick, and that it might take a while for them to be together again. What he didn't know was that this conversation would be just the beginning of discoveries that would shake everything he thought he knew about his own family. The morning came with Marina waking before sunrise, sitting up in bed and staring out the window with an expression that mixed anxiety and hope. Richard found her like that when he went to check on her. "Good morning, Marina. Did you sleep well? Am I going to see Mommy today?" The simple question carried so much weight that Richard had to sit on the edge of the bed to keep from collapsing. During the night, he had mentally rehearsed how he would explain to a 4-year-old that her mother was in a psychiatric clinic. "Yes, we're going to see your mom today, but Marina, I need to explain something important." She turned completely toward him, her big eyes fixed on his face. "Your mom is in a special kind of hospital, a place where doctors take care of people who get very sad for a long time. She's not hurt on the outside, but her heart and her mind needed help to get better." "Why did she get sad?" Richard swallowed hard. "Sometimes grown-ups go through very hard things, and it makes them sick on the inside, like when you have a tummy ache, but it's a pain that stays in your heart." Marina nodded slowly, as if that made sense to her. "Is that why she cried so much?" "Probably. And is that why she couldn't get out of bed?" "Yes." Marina was quiet for a long time, processing the information. "Is she going to get better?" "The doctors are helping her get better, but it might take a little while." "And can I help her get better?" Richard's heart broke at the purity of the question. "I think just seeing you will help her a whole lot." 2 hours later, they were in Richard's Mercedes on the highway heading to Westchester. Marina had chosen to wear the new dress he'd bought her, blue with little white flowers, and was holding a drawing she'd made the night before, a female figure next to a small figure, both smiling under a yellow sun. "It's for Mommy," she explained when Richard asked about the drawing. "So she remembers that I still love her." The Hope Clinic was on a large property surrounded by gardens. It was a place designed to convey peace, with soft colors and large windows that let in natural light. Mr. Davis was waiting for them in the reception area, with Dr. Helen Carter, the psychiatrist in charge of Carla's case. "Mr. Miller," Dr. Carter greeted them, "and you must be Marina. Your mother talks about you a lot." Marina hid behind Richard, intimidated by the hospital environment. "How is Carla today?" Richard asked. "She had a difficult night when she learned you were coming. Anxious, but also hopeful. It's important for you to know that she's very emotionally fragile. Any shock could cause a regression in her treatment. We understand." "Marina," Dr. Carter knelt to be at the girl's level, "your mommy is taking medicine that sometimes makes her feel sleepy or confused. That doesn't mean she doesn't love you or that she isn't happy to see you, okay?" Marina nodded, clutching the drawing even tighter in her hands. They walked down bright, quiet hallways to a visiting room decorated like a common living room, with comfortable sofas and green plants. Dr. Carter asked them to wait while she went to get Carla. When the door opened again, Richard saw a 28-year-old woman who looked 10 years older. Carla Garcia was tall and far too thin, with blonde hair that had lost its shine, and blue eyes that seemed to carry all the suffering in the world. She wore simple clothes and moved as if every step pained her. But the moment her eyes found Marina, something in them ignited. "Marina." Carla's voice was a broken whisper, full of disbelief and hope. Marina let go of Richard's hand and ran to her mother, who knelt and wrapped her in a desperate hug, as if afraid she might disappear at any moment. "My baby," Carla sobbed, kissing her daughter's hair repeatedly. "My little Marina. Mommy missed you so much. So much." "I missed you too, Mommy. And I brought you a drawing." Carla took the paper with trembling hands, looking at the drawing as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "It's beautiful, my love. So beautiful." Richard watched the scene with a lump in his throat, but he also noticed how Carla avoided looking at him directly. There was shame in her posture, as if she felt guilty for having lost her daughter. Carla, he said softly, my name is Richard Miller. I know who you are, Carla interrupted, her voice taking on a bitter edge. You're the owner of the company that destroyed my life. The silence that followed was heavy. Marina looked from her mother to Richard, confused by the sudden tension. Carla, Dr. Carter intervened, remember what we talked about. Mr. Miller is taking care of Marina. He brought her here so you could be reunited. Why? Carla asked, finally looking at Richard with eyes that mixed anger and distrust. Why would the man who let Edward Vance destroy my life now want to play the savior? I didn't know, Richard said, his voice thick with guilt. I swear, on everything holy, I didn't know what Edward did to you. If I had known— You didn't know, Carla laughed, humorlessly. You were the CEO of the company. How could you not know your sister was burying sexual harassment complaints? How could you not know your female employees were being systematically silenced? Richard felt as if each word were a slap. You're right, I should have known, I should have paid attention, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that mistake. Mommy, Marina interrupted, her small voice frightened. Why are you mad at Richard? He gave me food and a real bed. He saved me from Aunt Agnes. Carla looked at her. Daughter? And her expression softened immediately. Aunt Agnes? Who's Aunt Agnes, baby? Marina told her story with the brutal honesty of children, describing the 2 years of forced labor, the nights sleeping on the floor, the constant hunger, the fear of being sent back if she didn't work well enough. With every detail, Carla's face grew paler. By the time Marina finished, she was crying silently. Oh my God, Carla whispered. What did I do to you? How could I have abandoned you like that? You didn't abandon me, Marina said with the impossible wisdom of a child who has endured trauma beyond her years. You got sick. Now you're getting better. Carla hugged her daughter again, but this time the hug was different. It was a plea for forgiveness, a promise of protection, and the expression of a love that had never disappeared, only been buried under layers of pain. Carla, Richard said quietly, can I tell you what I found out about Edward? She looked up, still holding Marina in her lap. I found the recordings you made. Mr. Davis managed to recover everything from your phone. I have proof of everything he did, and I discovered you. Weren't the only one. He harassed at least 5 other women. And what are you going to do about it? I'm going to sue him. I'm going to expose everything. And I'm going to find every woman who was harmed to make reparations. Even if it destroys your company? Especially if it destroys my company? Carla studied him for a long time, as if trying to read his soul through his eyes. Why do you care so much about Marina? Why are you doing all this? Richard looked at the little girl, who had settled into her mother's lap as if she had never left. Because when I found her in the company bathroom, scrubbing a toilet at 4 years old, believing she had to work to deserve food, I saw the concrete result of my negligence. I saw a child paying the price for my omissions. And now? Now I want to make sure she never goes through this again, and that no other little girl does either. Carla was silent for a few minutes, watching Marina play with the buttons on her blouse. Doctor, she said to Dr. Carter, how long until I can get out of here? Carla, you know that depends on your progress. There's still a lot of work to do. What if I have a bigger motivation to get better? Meaning? Carla looked at Marina and then at Richard. If Marina is well cared for, if she's safe, that gives me the strength to fight for my recovery faster. Don't push yourself, Carla, Richard said. Marina can stay with me for as long as it takes. I don't want your charity, Carla replied with wounded pride, but I will accept your temporary help until I'm well enough to take care of my daughter on my own. It was then that Dr. Carter asked a question that changed everything. Carla, did you talk to anyone else at the company about what Edward did to you, besides the formal complaints? I spoke to one person, yes. I thought he might help me because he was always kind to me. Who? Robert Miller, Richard's father. He was a special consultant for the company at the time. Richard felt the world spin. His father, who had passed away 6 months ago, had known about Edward 3 years before his death. He had known and done nothing, or worse, he had done something Richard had yet to discover. The silence in the visiting room was deafening. Richard felt as if the floor had disappeared from under his feet. His father, the man he idolized, whom he considered a paragon of integrity, had known about Edward and had done nothing. "What exactly did my father say to you when you went to him?" Richard asked, his voice coming out harsher than he intended. Carla adjusted Marina on her lap, as if her daughter's presence gave her the strength to relive those painful memories. "It was 2 days after they dismissed my third complaint. I was desperate. I didn't know what else to do. Your father was always polite to me. He'd say hello when he saw me in the halls. I thought maybe he could intercede for me. And did he? He listened to me for almost 2 hours. I showed him all the evidence I had, the emails, the texts, even the recordings. He seemed genuinely horrified." Richard leaned forward. "And then?" "He said he would handle the situation personally, that Edward would be properly punished and that I didn't have to worry about losing my job." "But you were fired 2 weeks later." Carla laughed bitterly. "Fired for cause. They claimed I was missing too much work and that my productivity had dropped dramatically." "Which wasn't true." "Of course not. I was working twice as hard, trying to prove my worth so they couldn't fire me. But apparently the decision had already been made," Dr. Carter interjected softly. "Richard, perhaps it's best to continue this conversation later. Carla is getting agitated." But Carla shook her head. "No, doctor, I need to talk about this. I've held it in for too long." She turned back to Richard. "Do you know what the worst part was? The day before I was fired, your father called me in for a private conversation." Richard felt his stomach clench. "What did he say to you?" "He said he had tried to help, but that Edward was too valuable to the company. That there were other interests at play that I didn't understand. He offered me a generous compensation if I left quietly." "How much?" $50,000, a fortune for me back then. But it came with a condition. I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement and never speak about Edward or the company again." Richard closed his eyes, feeling nauseous. "And you refused?" "I refused. I told him it wasn't about the money, it was about justice, that other women could go through what I did." "And what did he say?" Tears began to stream down Carla's face. "He said I was being naive, that the business world didn't run on teenage ideals, and that if I insisted on making trouble, the consequences would be much worse than just being fired." "What kind of consequences?" "He said Edward had connections all over the industry, that one word from him could keep me from getting a job anywhere, that I could end up permanently blacklisted." Richard opened his eyes, staring at Carla in horror. "My father threatened you?" "Not directly, but he made it very clear that if I didn't accept his generosity, my professional life was over." "And that's what happened?" "Exactly. After I was fired, I applied for jobs at dozens of companies. I'd always make it to the final round of interviews and then be mysteriously rejected. Once, a recruiter I knew from other processes called me off the record to tell me my name was being circulated as a problem employee." Marina had fallen asleep on Carla's lap during the conversation, emotionally exhausted from the reunion. Dr. Carter suggested they lay the girl on one of the sofas, and they gently settled her down. "Go on," Richard said, his voice thick with guilt and rage. "Within 6 months, I'd burned through my savings. I started falling behind on rent, on basic bills. Marina started going hungry. I fell into despair, developed severe depression." "And that's when you started drinking?" Carla nodded, ashamed. "Drinking was the only thing that made the pain stop for a few hours, but it also made everything worse. I stopped being able to take care of Marina properly. I'd be non-functional for days at a time." "Is that when Agnes showed up?" "Agnes was a janitor in the building where I lived. She knew about my situation. One day I was so out of it, I couldn't even open the door for Marina when she got back from daycare. Agnes came up, saw the state of things. And she offered to help? She offered to take Marina temporarily while I got myself together. She said she'd take good care of her, that Marina could even help a little with her work to learn responsibility." Richard felt bile rise in his throat. "And you let her?" "I was institutionalized. I had tried to kill myself the night before." Carla exploded, then checked herself as she saw Marina stir on the sofa. "I'm sorry, But you don't understand the state I was in. I thought anything would be better than a mother who couldn't even get out of bed. Carla. Agnes visited a few times at first, brought Marina to see me. But with each visit, Marina was thinner, quieter, more scared. When I asked what was going on, Agnes said Marina was learning discipline. And you didn't suspect. I was sedated most of the time, and when I was lucid, I was focused on not trying to kill myself again. Carla began to sob. I was the worst mother in the world. No. Marina had woken up and heard the last part. She got up and went to Carla, climbing back into her lap. You're not the worst, Mommy. You got sick. Sick people can't take good care of people. The wisdom of the 4-year-old left everyone in the room speechless. Marina's right, Richard said finally. This isn't your fault, Carla. It's my fault, my family's, my company's. You two are the victims. What are you going to do about your father? Carla asked. Richard ran his hands through his hair, trying to process everything. He died 6 months ago. I can't confront him, but I can investigate what else he knew, how many other situations like yours he helped cover up. Your sister must know more. Beatrice, yes, Beatrice definitely knows more than she's told me. Dr. Carter stepped in. Richard, I think this has been enough for Carla for one day. She needs to process all of this slowly. Of course, Richard stood up. Carla, can I bring Marina to visit you again, maybe this weekend? Please, Carla said, holding Marina's hand. And Richard? Yes? Thank you for taking care of her, for believing me, for trying to do the right thing even if it's too late. It's not too late. It's never too late to do the right thing. In the car on the way back to New York City, Marina was unusually quiet. Richard watched her in the rearview mirror, seeing her gaze out the window with an expression far too pensive for a little girl. How are you feeling, Marina? Sad and happy at the same time. How so? Sad because Mommy was sick for so long. Happy because she still loves me. She has always loved you, Marina, even when she was sick. I know, but now I'm sure. Richard's cell phone rang. It was Mr. Davis. Richard, I need to see you urgently. I found something in your father's files that's going to change everything. What did you find? I can't talk about it over the phone. But Richard, it's much worse than we imagined. Worse how? Edward wasn't the only one. And your father wasn't just covering things up, he was coordinating. Richard felt the world spin. What do you mean, coordinating? Richard, come to my office now. And bring Beatrice. She needs to hear this too. Maurice, just give me a hint of what you discovered. Your father kept detailed files on all the female employees at the company, photos, personal information, notes on their suitability for senior executives. He was literally cataloguing women like objects. Richard had to pull the car over to the shoulder. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't drive. And it gets worse, Richard. Much worse. What? I found correspondence between him and executives at other companies. They were trading merchandise, passing problem employees to each other as a way to get rid of their problems. Oh my God! And Richard? Yes. Beatrice wasn't just dismissing cases. She was recruiting, actively seeking out vulnerable women to bring into the company. Richard hung up the phone and stood on the shoulder for 15 minutes, trying not to be sick. In the back seat, Marina had fallen asleep again, clutching the drawing she had made for her mother. Looking at that innocent child, who had survived 2 years of slavery because of the greed and cruelty of his own family, Richard made a decision that would change everything. He wouldn't just expose Edward and Beatrice, he would expose everything, including his father's rotten legacy, even if it meant completely destroying the company and his own reputation. Some things were more important than money or prestige, and Marina Garcia was one of them. 6 months later, Richard stood in the clinic's garden, watching Marina play with other children, while he waited for Carla to finish her last therapy session. Spring had arrived in New York City, and with it, changes that none of them could have foreseen. That night he found a little girl cleaning a bathroom. Mr. Davis's office on that fateful afternoon had been the scene of the most devastating revelation of his life. Beatrice had arrived confidently, thinking it was just another meeting about legal strategy. When Mr. Davis spread Robert Miller's files across the table, her expression changed completely. "Beatrice," Richard had said, his voice trembling with controlled rage, "I want you to explain this." She had looked at the documents, photos of female employees with notes on their physical appearance, files with personal information including marital status and financial vulnerabilities, correspondence with other companies offering transfers of problem women. "Richard, I can explain." "Then explain why our company had a file called Available Resources with photos and profiles of female employees categorized by suitability for senior executives." Beatrice had tried to justify it, claiming it was just an efficient way to manage human resources. But when Mr. Davis showed the emails from her specifically recruiting women in debt or with young children, profiles that were easier to control and silence, there was no denying it. The confrontation had lasted 4 hours. In the end, Beatrice had confessed everything, crying in a way Richard hadn't seen since they were children. The scheme was bigger than he had imagined, a network of companies that exchanged information on problem employees, ensuring that women who reported abuse were systematically blacklisted from the job market. Robert Miller hadn't just participated, he had helped create the system. The public fallout had been devastating. Miller and Associates lost 80% of its clients in 2 weeks. Edward resigned and fled to Miami, but the criminal charges followed him. Beatrice was fired and faced multiple lawsuits. Richard had lost almost everything financially, but for the first time in years he could sleep peacefully. "Richard!" Marina ran toward him, her hair flying in the wind. In 6 months, she had transformed into a completely different child. Her eyes no longer held that constant fear, and she had gained enough weight to look healthy for the first time. "Look what I found." She held up a small yellow flower. "It's for Mommy. She said yellow is the color of hope." "It's beautiful, just like you." Marina smiled and ran back to the other children. Richard watched her play normally without the hypervigilance that had characterized her first few months with him. Child therapy had worked wonders. "She's so much better." Richard turned to see Carla approaching. In 6 months of intensive treatment, she had regained weight, color in her face, and most importantly, the light in her eyes. There were still difficult days, but the doctors were optimistic about her full release. "How was today's session?" "Good. Dr. Carter thinks I can be discharged next week." Richard felt a mix of joy and apprehension. He had grown used to taking care of Marina, and the thought of being separated from her, even though it was the right thing, hurt. "Carla, you know you can count on me for anything, right? Financially, emotionally, whatever you need." "I know, and I'm grateful for everything. But Richard, I need to learn how to be Marina's mom again, on my own." "I understand. It doesn't mean you'll disappear from her life. She loves you like you're her dad. But I need to prove to myself that I can take care of my daughter." Richard nodded, respecting her decision. During the months of visits, he had watched the bond between mother and daughter slowly rebuild. Marina had started talking about Mommy and Richard as her 2 sources of security in the world. "Speaking of which," Carla continued, "I accept your offer on the apartment, but as rent, not a gift. I want to work and pay my own bills." Richard had offered her a small but comfortable apartment near the clinic to ease the transition. "Of course. And about work, you know I started the foundation. The Marina Garcia Foundation, I know. And I'm honored you used her name. But Richard, first I need a normal job. I need to prove to myself that I can function in the real world." The Marina Garcia Foundation had been created with Richard's last resources, focused on supporting women who were victims of workplace harassment and children in situations of exploitation. It was his way of turning tragedy into purpose. "I've already found a few job opportunities," Carla continued. "Companies that aren't part of your father's old network, places where I can start fresh." "And Marina? How is she handling everything?" "Better than I imagined. The therapy helped a lot. She understands that what happened to her wasn't her fault or mine or yours. It was the fault of bad people who hurt a lot of people." Just then, Marina ran toward them again, this time followed by a slightly older girl. "Mommy, Richard, this is Juliana. She's getting discharged next week too." The little girl waved shyly. Carla knelt to be at her level. "Hi, Juliana. Are you two going to miss each other when you leave?" "Nope," Marina answered with the casualness of children. "Because we're still going to be friends on the outside, and Juliana is going to visit our new apartment," Richard smiled. Marina had learned that relationships could continue even when circumstances changed. It was a valuable lesson many adults never learned. "Marina," Carla said, "why don't you show Juliana the butterfly garden? Richard and I need to talk a little more." The girls ran off, and the mother and adoptive father were left alone again. "Richard, there's something I need to tell you about Beatrice." "What about her?" "She reached out to me last week." Richard tensed. "Here at the clinic?" "No. She called me. She wanted to apologize personally. She said she can't stop thinking about what she did, especially to Marina." "And what did you say?" "I told her I appreciated the apology, but that she should focus on repairing the damage she caused to all the women affected, not just on making herself feel better." "And what did she say?" "That she's using all the money she has left to compensate the victims she can find, that she sold everything of value she owned to do it." Richard was surprised. In recent months, Beatrice had practically disappeared from his life. He knew she was facing multiple lawsuits, but he hadn't imagined she was actively trying to make amends. "Carla, did you forgive her? Forgiveness is complicated. I understand she was raised in that sick system, that maybe she never truly understood the harm she was causing. But understanding isn't excusing. The consequences of her actions almost killed me and left my daughter traumatized for years." "And now? How do you feel about everything?" Carla looked at Marina playing in the garden, free and happy. "I feel like we finally managed to turn all this pain into something positive. Marina is healing, I'm healing. You discovered who you really are underneath all those corporate expectations. And you, who are you now? I'm still figuring that out, but for the first time in years I'm excited to find out." They stood in silence for a few minutes, watching the children play. The afternoon sun cast a golden light that made everything seem more hopeful. "Richard," Carla said finally, "there's something Marina wants to ask you, but she's scared." "What is it? If you'll still be her dad even when she's living with me." Richard's heart filled with an emotion he couldn't name. "And what do you think?" "I think Marina can be lucky enough to have a mom who loves her and an adoptive dad who saved her. If you want to, of course." "Carla, I would love that. I can't imagine my life without Marina." "Then it's settled. We're an unconventional family, but we're a family." Just then, Marina came running toward them, her eyes shining with joy. "Guess what happened? A butterfly landed on my hand. The nice lady said that means good things are going to happen." Richard swept her up into his arms, feeling how perfectly she fit. "And do you believe that?" "Of course, because ever since you found me, only good things have happened. I have you, I have Mommy getting better, I have a new apartment, I have friends. And you also have school," Carla added, smiling. "Marina is starting kindergarten next month." "And I'm going to learn to read," Marina exclaimed, "so I can read stories to other kids who are sad." Richard exchanged a look with Carla. Marina's natural generosity, even after everything she had been through, was breathtaking. "Marina," Richard said, "can I ask you an important question?" "Sure." "Would you like me to keep being your dad even when you go live with your mom?" Marina's face lit up as if he had offered her all the toys in the world. "You really want to?" "More than anything in the world." "Then yes, 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 yes," she hugged him tightly. "Now I have a mommy and a daddy. I'm the luckiest girl in the world." As Richard held Marina and watched Carla smile genuinely for the first time since he'd met her, he reflected on the last 6 months. He had lost a company, a fortune, his illusions about his family, and almost all of his friends. But he had gained something infinitely more valuable, the chance to be a father to an extraordinary little girl, to help a brave woman rebuild herself, and above all to discover who he really was when all the social masks and external expectations were stripped away. In that garden, with the spring sun shining down on them and a 4-year-old girl laughing in his arms, Richard finally understood the meaning of true wealth. It wasn't money in the bank or titles on the wall. It was the unconditional love of a child who had chosen him as her father, the trust of a woman who had accepted his help to rebuild her life, and the peace of mind that came from finally doing the right thing. Marina had stopped working to earn love, and Richard had learned that true love didn't need to be earned. It just needed to be offered freely, protected fiercely, and valued infinitely. It was an ending none of them could have imagined was possible that night in the company bathroom, but it was perfect precisely because of that, because sometimes the best families are the ones we choose to build together, even after everything else has fallen apart.